Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I often brag to anyone who will listen that we are an international broadcast and podcast. We have viewers from all over the world. We have guests from all over the world. And today I'm proving myself right with Shilpa Alva. She's the founder and executive director of Surge for Water. Welcome, my new best friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Julia.
Okay, Shilpa, this is a really sexy answer. Where are you coming to us from today?
From Samarkand, Uzbekistan.
Amazing. And what time is it?
It is 10:30 p.m., I think. Yes.
Amazing. And we are so delighted to have you. We're so honored that you would find the time, find the broadband, and, you know, I'm sure you've had a heck of a busy day. And so thank you for joining us on the Nonprofit Show today.
Thank you for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation, and we're going to weave in so many things. But one of the things we're going to be talking about is catalyzing women in water issues. And how do we do that? And how do we get people to engage, understand? And we're going to talk about fund and support and donate to this with Shilpa. Again, we have amazing support from our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and Tony Bell, one of our other intrepid co-hosts, he and I have written a book called The Architecture of Fundraising. It's really a great read on how you and your team and even your board can look up at fundraising. It's only $19.99 and it's available on Amazon. Okay, but more importantly, the book we want to get into is being written by Shilpa Alva. She's the founder and executive director of Surge for Water. You can learn more about Surge for Water at surgeforwater.org. Okay, Shilpa, explain to me what Surge for Water does.
Yes, so Surge is a global nonprofit. We're based out of Chicago in the US and also in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. That's where we have branch offices. And we work on the global water crisis. We like to call it comprehensive water plus. So we start with water and we go beyond. And what that means is that it includes sanitation, so toilets for schools and healthcare facilities. We do hygiene, so soap making and education on basic critical hygiene practices. And we work on menstrual health as well, because that is all based on our woman-centered, woman-led model. And we are also proudly community-owned. We work in very rural, remote parts of the world in Uganda, Indonesia, and Haiti. And in all of those communities, we partner with incredible local organizations, and we really help their visions come to life. So that's who we are.
So, this is a really big topic. I should say a lot of topics, but they all weave together in ways that many people in the West would never even begin to understand. So, talk to us, if you could, to kind of give us an idea where things are as they stand here at the end of 2025. Like, what is the status of women and global water issues, especially coming from those diverse population or locations where you work?
Yeah, so, the global water crisis is a gender issue, right? It's disproportionately impacts women and girls because
Mhm.
it is in most parts of the world, it's women and girls who are doing that daily trek every single day, multiple times a day, very often, walking long distances over harsh terrain to collect water for their family survival. And this is one thing, right? Hundreds, like I think it's collectively 200 million hours are lost, right? You can't even imagine or comprehend a number that big, right? Look at what that means. And so
Mhm.
that's one side of the equation. And then the other side of the equation is that while women and girls are disproportionately affected, and it's this burden that we carry, we are not represented in advocating for our own solutions, right? We're not in leadership roles, we're not in management roles. So
Mhm.
a lot of the solutions are being implemented by men and it's great. Like we want everyone involved in solving it, but Surge takes this approach of very strongly and deliberately involving women and including them in solving the crisis because we believe that in order to solve any crisis, you need to start with the people closest to the issue. And
Right.
what I'd also add to that, Julia, is that in this world that we live in, right, there are so many injustices. The fact
Mhm.
that today, in this day and age, when there's so many advances in technology, that women still have to do this, like walk this long distance, pump water, carry it,
Mhm.
is like one of the most profound injustices, right? It is oppression. It is a form of racism. It's like so many things when you think about where the issue is. So I think so much is packed in to the global water crisis. And like we tend to say, and not just us, several other water orgs in this space, that the water crisis is a woman's crisis.
I love that you beautifully articulated that. I'm sad that you had to, but I think that most people in the West have no idea how arduous, how dangerous, and how disruptive it is, um, to have to get this water, navigation managed in your system, within your family, because as we know, water is life. If you don't have it, then there's just all these other things that you can't do. So thank you for kind of helping us to understand that it's not just about the wells and the pipes, but that it has a much bigger significance, than maybe most people, certainly most of our viewers and listeners, might have ever even understood, right? So we talk about where we are right now. Let's talk about the business side of sustainability and social impact. You mentioned the staggering just hours, the hours that women engage in the transportation of water is taking away their focus and their attention on other things, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you're collecting water, what are you losing out on, right? So when you're a young girl, a student, I mean, there are boys affected by this crisis as well. It's just predominantly girls and women.
Mhm.
You're missing school, and every missed year of school has a direct impact on the long term, like economic situation of that girl, but also their families and their communities, right, in the future. And then when you take women who've been in this crisis, right, since they very often since they were young girls, that's taking them away from income generating opportunities. It's taking them away from caring for their family and other domestic roles, which are critical in these societies that we work in, right? And then you're affecting that family unit in that environment. So it's already been studied, like the World Bank has put out studies that for every dollar that's invested in this comprehensive water plus, or WASH is the more typical way it's called in our
Right?
industry, that there's a $21 return on investment for, when you look at all avenues, right, all income that comes back into that community just by investing in, water access, toilets, hygiene, and
Mhm.
those comprehensive services.
Mhm. I got to ask this question. Do your communities realize this when it's always been the role of women to go out and get this water, and that's their domestic responsibility? Do you get pushback from communities that say, "Well, this is the way we've done it, and this is women's work"?
We don't interfere with that sort of like
Ah,
social structure. All we're trying to do is make it easier for the women. So we're not coming into those societies sort of from the outsiders, right? We are an American organization. And the last thing we want to do is come in with our own views on what equity looks like and what gender equity looks like and
mhm.
force that onto other people. So it's a
Interesting.
great question that you asked, Julia. So I want to clarify. What we're doing is respecting the existing social norms and cultural norms, but making that journey easier because it can still be the woman's work, and they take great pride, right, in caring for their families and cooking and cleaning. I mean, that those are their roles for generations, and we're not trying to disrupt that. All we're trying to do is make that role easier because when you speak to the woman, like they're not enjoying this long walk. They want to shorten it so that they can spend time, more time in their farm. And then when they get those products from their farm, go sell it in the markets. There are other things they want to do. And
Right.
it's interesting, Joe, you brought up something else. Like, there is a lot of gender-based violence on the walks for water, but
Yes.
there's also a lot of, not a lot, it does occur that there's gender-based violence in some of these homes in these rural communities. So sometimes there's been these conversations of like in our space, like, oh, like if the woman spends more time at home, is she more prone to gender-based violence in our home? And I'm like, that's no reason to stop to make not make someone's journey easier, right? That's another issue that we can tackle at another level. But the goal is like it's not our place, right? Like if you and I can walk to a tap to do anything that we want in a few seconds, right? Then
Mhm.
every woman, like, we want that, right? Like you and I'm sure both want that for all our sisters around the world,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, right. I think it's, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but let's just stop and talk about this now. How do you get people to understand your point of view when they have never had to think about that? We waste so much water. I'll speak personally in my household or in my community, and I live in a desert community. Um, how do we get people to link up what you're doing and why it's so important when they will never go probably to the continents that you serve? They will never understand the cultural differences, the linguistic differences, even the climate differences. How do you do that?
It's definitely hard work for sure when you think about that. I'd say that our focus is really the people who already are on that journey.
Mm,
There's plenty of people who are realizing that there's a climate crisis, and the water crisis is very closely tied to the
yes.
climate crisis, right? So there are people who are realizing this in the United States and in several other parts of the world that are considered more developed. People are learning more about the global water crisis, and I think what ends up being really hard is when we talk about 2 billion people lacking access, that's just really overwhelming, right?
Mhm.
So we try a lot to share the stories because every single picture that you see on our Surge website or on our social media pages, we've met those people. Those are direct program participants, right? We know their names, like we've been in their schools, right? These are people who've directly benefited from our programs, and each of those people have a story, right? They have families, they have dreams, they're just
Mhm.
like us. So we try a lot to focus on the storytelling aspect. But I will
Mhm.
say, like, we don't have a huge marketing budget. So we're not the org that's trying to convert like everyone and get them to understand this crisis. We sort of take the path of like, okay, maybe your lowest hanging fruit, if you want to call it, the people who are already on that journey, and their friends maybe who want to come along, and that's the journey. And the other way that we've been able to do it quite successfully is that one of our fundraising avenues are events, and our events are not water events. They have other themes, and we just had one in Dubai. That's the other place that we have a branch location. We just completed our biggest fundraiser there, and that was an event entirely in partnership with the interior design and architecture community. So the people coming to our event were not necessarily aware that this was a global water crisis, definitely not at the scale that it's at. But for the past
Mhm.
12 years, through this event, they've been coming because of the interior design industry connection. And that's a way to convert them as well, right? You bring them in for a different reason. And then in the room, you're like, guess what? Here's the issue. This is why you're really here.
Yeah, I'm all about that. I think you've got to, you know, it's going to be such a foreign, sadly, it's going to be such a foreign concept to a lot of people, right? They'll be like, oh wow, I never stopped to think about that. And so I agree. I think to navigate towards new voices, new people with a new voice, I think is a really smart thing to do. And so speaking of that, we've had, and I mentioned this in the green room, Shipla, that if I'd asked you this question like 8 months ago, 6 months ago, it would have been different. But there's been such a restructuring in international aid, the way that we're thinking about international aid, the way we're thinking about funding it and supporting it. Your boots on the ground, what have you been seeing when it comes to this power structure?
Yeah, so the international aid world has definitely been rocked in this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
with the US aid funding cuts. And
Mhm.
from Surge's standpoint, we've been quite fortunate because we never had government funding. So that did not affect us. But the way it is affecting us is that there's more competition in the spaces that we are in, right? Because the organizations that had government funding are going after the same sources. And so that's always, that's going to still, it's still to be determined. The way we balance that in a way is, we have, we're quite fortunate that we have the US funding, and we also are based in Dubai, and that's another fundraising arm. And we've been focusing a lot on the Dubai aspect of it and trying to raise additional funds there to make up for honestly what we're envisioning the future in the US to be from a corporate funding landscape. So
Interesting.
that's one piece of it. But it's the words on that on when you talk about dismantling power structures for Surge, I want to say that that's also about how we go into this work, right? Like
Mm.
we're really into decolonial practices, and
Mhm.
it's so important for all of us who work in the international aid world to understand that we are an extension of colonial structures, right? Like,
Yes,
why do we exist to begin with? And we're
indeed.
really conscious of this at Surge. So we go in and we're actively looking at the fact that we hold the power because we have the money, and what does that mean, right? Like, what does that look like? And those are the practices that we incorporate in our work of like, how do you break that down every single day in decision making, and how money is spent, in accountability, in monitoring. And we're constantly learning and evolving to ensure that we minimize the power we hold, and that the people who are delivering the programs, right, in Uganda, in Indonesia, and Haiti, the locals, are the ones shaping the solutions for their own communities.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a tough mirror to look into for a lot of your donors and I would imagine structural funders, because not everybody is willing to do that. We bandy about this horrible term, white savior, where people think, oh, they have the answers because they have the money and the power. And yeah, so I love this is a huge lift on top of a structure that an issue you're already dealing with. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, people don't want to hear this, right? I was in a conversation recently, and someone was, I said something like, the first step is to acknowledge that we're a problem, right? Like we are part of the problem. Like even if, of course, we're doing this amazing work and providing water and toilets and soap and all of these things, but you have to understand your role in the aid world as well, and like keep minimizing that part of the problem, right? Like why is the money coming to a US organization instead of directly to the communities in Uganda, right? And there's many reasons. Like this is a whole different conversation for many more hours, but
Mhm.
just recognizing that, and it's not something we're going to solve overnight, and we're still, fundraising quite heavily and accepting these funds, and because we know we can do good with it, and we want to be, we're actively choosing to be in this world and to be better and to do better.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's hard because sometimes, Julia, I even consider like, I have the deep thoughts of like, you know, should we be doing this, right? You have to constantly
Yeah,
evaluate, right? Like why you're in this space, and that
right.
ensuring that you're doing more good every
Right.
single time. And that's very hard to do.
It's very hard to do because it's heartbreaking, to look at a problem and then to say what's the bigger issue here,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, what's immediate and what's long term. So you've really opened the door for us in so many issues like the gender issue, community leadership, talking about roles and responsibilities, technology, the employment of our resources, what we put our day-to-day hourly lives on the line so that we can increase our families or our food production, all of those things. And for the Western world, and I'm going to call it out for well-to-do whites, this is something that most of them will have never incurred. They will have never even thought about it. So how do you connect with donors to try and, dare I say, educate them or bring them up to the level of why you need support and why you go about the way you do your business? Because it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it falls into like three ways that we do this. So
Mhm.
I think one is the events piece I talked about, right? When we have engagements with people, so you bring them in the room for something that they connect to, and then you're expanding their horizons. I mean, I love that. Like if I've entered, I'm in Uzbekistan right now. Like you come here with a certain mindset. Like, I don't think of myself as a judgmental person or something, but when you travel, it opens up your mind. So
Oh, yeah.
same thing, right? Like you go to a new place, you learn so much. So you come into our room with the surge team and you're going to leave knowing so much more about the global water crisis, right? So
Mhm.
that's one piece of it. The other is the storytelling aspect that I mentioned, right? Like really breaking it down to individuals, right? If you're a mother, let me tell you about other mothers. If you're a father with
Mm.
young girls, let me talk to you about the situation of menstrual health. Like if you're so there's ways that I think people can relate to, or imagine, maybe relate is pushing it, but and not, empathy needs to grow in general in the world, but bringing them along on this journey, right? We've had education programs for youth that we take them on this, global water like challenge, and we've done things like that. And I'd want to say that the third way that has helped us to like get funding and support is that, especially with the situation in the world, I really believe that more and more people want to do something about it, and they're struggling with ways on
Mm.
how to do something about it. And sometimes, like our org is, we're growing, but we're still like small enough where you can connect to me, you can connect to like our team
Mhm.
members, our board members, and several people have come with us into the communities, right? Like, and I think in these situations, people want to like know the founder in a way, or they want to know like the people who are running the show, they want to trust us. And of course
Yeah.
that's not for sustainable long-term growth, but at the stage we're at, and like our network of trusted people and their further networks, if you keep rippling this out, that's a great way of connecting to donors, because you're going to trust what your friends are doing, right? And we go
Mhm.
after a lot of corporate partnerships or grant funding, right? And those administrators of those grants will recommend us to their peers, right? We're finally
Mhm.
getting invited to invite-only grants, right? Like things that take a
Good.
long time in the
Oh.
US. And so all these things are helping us connect, but it's starting with building the relationships we have, and really solidifying and growing them further and
Mhm.
stewarding them.
When I think about this next gen donorship wave and how donor behavior is changing, certainly in North America, um, if you have the opportunity, and I know this is going to seem like a wackadoo question, but if you have the opportunity to tell a story or to share metrics or data, what are you and your team kind of leaning towards?
The story.
Oh,
It's
oh,
a,
you
and this
are.
is, yeah,
Okay.
it's it's interesting, right? Like it's, and I come from an engineering background, so it's
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd even answer that like that way, a decade ago or several decades ago. But the reason I say the story is because what I see happening is that the humanity out of this work is like getting diminished, and it sounds very strange, right? But
Mm.
why are we in this space, right? We're here because we're all people and we love, there's love and there's empathy and there's care. And like, this is why I do this work. And of course, we have the data and the metrics and we can share that. I'll email those to you. I'm not going to do a detailed
Mhm.
presentation on that. But if I have an opportunity to do one or the other, I would want you to connect to the human behind it.
Mhm.
Um, and, and I just think that that's so important, not just in this work, in general in this world right now. The more disconnected we get, the more screens, the more technology. Like, who are we as people? At the end of the day, we all need water to survive, right? We all have dreams, and we education, work, like it's all connected. And so yeah, I choose the story.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. I'm glad that I love what you're saying. And I would say, especially for your work, that is something that people can't just drive down the street and see on their way to the supermarket or their, to a
Yes.
family event or a concert. They don't, they never connect with this. So, yeah, to tell that story. Are you doing more visual mediums? You doing more social media? Where are you landing with this type of communication?
Well, I think I was answering it more as a dream question, but if we, But in reality, we're doing as much as we can. We don't have a huge marketing budget, but we do as much as we can on social media platforms
Yeah.
and at the events that we have. And I do want to say, I say that from an idealistic standpoint, but of course, you have to have the data, right? We have
Oh,
detail like monitoring and evaluation systems, and when we're submitting grant reports, that's what we're like. That's the crux of it is, and I do think it's important. So I don't want to diminish that. I do think the data is really important as well,
yeah,
so that we know what we're doing, what's working, how to evolve it. But that's not the stuff we're sharing publicly. We're sharing
right.
more of the stuff on our social, mostly digital channels. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes sense, especially in an organization where you're trying to build that donor base. You said something that kind of, I call it a hair on fire moment. That I have to admit, and I'm pretty smart. I never thought about the migration of aid organizations who once got federal funding
Yeah.
that got cut off. Now they're in your swimming pool, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Everyone's
oh
going out to the same place.
yeah, I was like, you just said that, and I was like, well, duh, of course. And I had not really thought of that, Shilpa, because to me, and it has been, it's always been so separate.
Separate. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is frightening. That competitive nature and struggle is even more profound. Really, really
Yeah.
interesting to evaluate that. That's a
Yeah.
scenario you could not have planned for, right?
You can't. And the other piece that we're saying is that, yes, it's the type of donors, but we're also seeing it geographically. Like the number of
Mhm.
organizations now that are also looking, because we have that international funding base and it's quite a
Mhm.
significant part of our funding.
Mhm.
And more orgs are looking at like, the Middle East and like,
Mhm.
Qatar, the UAE, places that are very philanthropic and like
Mhm.
give out this money. So it's quite
Mhm.
interesting. Like it's, yeah, places that we were in like felt with a few friends, and now have a lot more people that are trying to join, which is, in the end, I think there's a lot of funding out there and
Mhm. Yeah.
there's more to be given. So it, I think it's okay. Like, I just think that we just, from a surge's perspective, it really comes down to, more importantly, like, how do you continue to share why the work we do is so essential and so critical, and more importantly, I believe, because there's so many organizations working in the water space, the way we do it is really unique and is beautiful. We go where no one else goes, right? In these remote rural communities, and actively doing it in a way that gives pride to local ownership and women. And I'm really proud of that model and what we've
Mhm.
built.
Well, I'm really proud that you would come on the nonprofit show and spend time with us. We have so much more we could talk about, and we're running out of time. I want to ask you, like, what's your big get or the thing that you want in 2026? Because we're at the end of the year, we're moving into this next year. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time for us actually at Surge. I know, we had these whole funding conversations, and I'm happy to say we've done really well this year. Like, and so that's we still have year end. That's a big time, and
Sure,
we're
sure.
projecting that will go well. And actually, our fiscal year ends in March of next year. But just looking into that, so it's really good to like be in a situation right now and know that from a funding perspective, we're looking good. And what that means then is, how do we get to spend it? And what we're looking
Mhm.
at now is more expansion. So we're actively looking at new community partnerships in Uganda, Indonesia, like places that we work in, expansion of like geographies and programs. And to be in a situation where you can do that brings so much joy, because there's so many great leaders around the world, and like we want to partner with more of them and be able to like bring their visions to life. So that's what excites me the most for 2026 right now.
It's super cool. Well, we've had a lot of great feedback from viewers and listeners that are with us live. I'm going to commit to you today that I'm putting you on our best of for 2025, and we will rebroadcast this, which we do at the end of the year, because I've been so moved by what you've said. I've been so enlightened, and it gives me hope for our sector and what we can do and how we can do it with differences, right? Do it differently. And so, what an incredible opportunity. Shilpa Avla, what an amazing human being. And I wish you could have joined us in the green room where Shilpa explained about her journey and her path and her tremendous education and global view. It's been really, really cool to have you on. Shilpa is the founder and executive director of Surge for Water. Learn about this amazing group at surgeforwater.org. Again, what a profound episode. So thank you. We have profound gratitude for our sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. These are the folks that help us day in and day out. We've produced more than 1,400 episodes, and this is going to go down as one of my faves. So thank you, Shilpa. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's been lovely. Hey, everybody, we end this episode with the same message that we've done from the beginning. And today it means something completely different in a way that I've never thought of. And the message goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again.